Hey guys, it's Ty and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm doing another recent reads. I have 9 books that I want to talk about. There are several that I really enjoyed. Unfortunately, I don't have any 5-star reads in this group, but I do have quite a few 4-star reads. And then there were a few books that I was really disappointed by. So we will just do this how I normally do it. We'll start with my lowest rated and work my way up to my highest rated. So we will go ahead and get started. So the first book that I want to talk about, and this is the only book that I have in my stack that I DNF'd. This is The Girl Who Can Move Shit With Her Mind by Jackson Ford. This is a adult sci-fi. So in this, we're following our main character, Tegan, and she is like part of this government group, and everyone that's a part of this group has done like really bad things and is like one step away from going to jail, but they've been recruited and they all work together. But the reason why Tegan was recruited into this group was because she has the power to move things with her mind. And so at the start of this one, they're on this job, and I believe they're like trying to get some information from someone that works at this company. The beginning of this was so fast paced. It was really entertaining. Parts of it was actually pretty funny. But after that, the pacing of this slowed down tremendously. And because of that, and because I was just not interested in all the characters that were being introduced, I had to DNF this. I DNF'd it 82 pages in, which I believe is like 18% of this story, and I just could not deal with how slow it got, and I'm not sure if it would have picked up at any point. The one thing that I did like about this is Tegan was under the impression that she was like, I guess, the only one in the world that had this particular power, but within like a couple of chapters, we learned that there is another guy that has the same power that she does. Now, I did like the introduction of that, but we didn't really get a lot of chapters from him. And I think eventually it was going to become more of a dual POV throughout the story. But his chapters were so few and far in between. And I feel like I already know where the story was going to go. So I just really did not want to pick this up. Every time I put it down, it was just like a struggle to pick it back up. And I was only reading maybe like a chapter or 2 at a time. At 82 pages, I only got to chapter 11. So every couple days when I was picking this up, I was just like reading a chapter or 2, and I just came to terms with I was not enjoying this. So like I said, I had to DNF it. So next we have The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This is a adult mystery thriller, and in this we are following our main character, Shay. And at the start of this, she's listening to a podcast that's run by one of her old high school friends, Jamie. And on the podcast during this particular episode, he reports that Shay's old college roommate friend has been found dead on their old college campus. So he reported that her death was ruled a suicide, but Shay doesn't believe that that is true. Jamie also does not believe that is true. And so they link up and they are trying to figure out what actually happened to Laurel. We also learn while they were in college, one of their other roommates was also found hanging on their college campus. So they believe that these 2 deaths are somehow connected. But while they're trying to figure out what happened to Laurel, during the podcast episodes, Shay is recounting what happened to the girls while they were in college, and you can tell that they were wrapped up in some sort of cult and being groomed. And so during their whole investigation, they come across another sex cult, and then Laurel is thrown back into this world she thought she had left behind. So I gave this 2 stars. I did not enjoy this at all. The only reason why I decided to push through this is because my sister gifted me this for Christmas, and so I just felt obligated to finish it. Although she did tell me that I could have DNF'd it, but it was too late. I had already suffered through this. So the only thing that I liked about this was a few of the twists at the end. I think there was one overall reveal and then some reasoning behind everything that was going on, which I enjoyed because I just did not see it coming. But I also really wasn't working that hard to figure it out because I was just trying to get through it. So I did like that. Now, my complaints about this book is that there is a podcast element, like I mentioned before, but it was not needed. I listened to this on audio, and I feel like they did themselves a disservice by not even making it sound like a podcast. It literally sounded like Jamie and Shay were just having really long conversations. If they didn't like introduce the podcast at the beginning of each of these conversations, you would not have known that it was a podcast. And if you just took the whole podcast element out of the story, it would not have changed anything. So I don't feel like it was needed. I feel like it was used as a way for Shay to tell her backstory. And I kind of feel like it was used as like a gimmick, because these days we read so many books that have like podcast elements. But I feel like if you're not even going to take the time to make it sound like a podcast, then why use it? And then the story to me just felt really slow. It felt really repetitive, especially when she started getting wrapped up into like this sex cult. I can understand, you know, this is supposed to be like a feminist story and women using their power and blah, blah, blah. But I just did not enjoy it. It was too slow. I did not care about all the things that these women were going through. It just, I don't know. It just really did not work for me. I suggest that if this is a book that you are still interested in, by all means pick it up. But please read the content warnings for this, because there are many. But like I said, 2 stars. I was not a fan of this one. So next we have First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This is a adult mystery thriller. So we're following this woman, Evie Porter, and she does these like jobs for her boss called Mr. Smith. And so at the start of this, she is on a current job, which she is supposed to be getting information on this guy that she's dating. His name is Ryan. His name is Ryan. So when she's working these jobs, she assumes different identities. And one night when her and Ryan are out at some sort of function, a woman introduces herself to Evie as Evie's original name, original identity. And so now Evie has it in her mind that Mr. Smith is doing something different with this job, and she has to figure out what it is and why she has become, I guess, sort of a target. I gave this 3 stars. Everybody has been hyping this story up, and I literally don't understand. To me, it was extremely slow. Not a lot was happening. It was very predictable, especially at the end, because there's not a lot of characters. So when a book doesn't have a lot of characters, in my opinion, especially when it's like mystery thrillers, it's not really hard to try and figure out what exactly is going on. And with these type of stories, even though I don't read a lot of stories where people are like assuming different aliases and whatnot, I just felt like I've seen a lot of movies like this. And so you can kind of figure out where the story is headed and all of like the different moving parts, which I figured it out pretty early on. And then I did like the flashback chapters. We are seeing Evie when she was using different aliases, because they kind of like play a part in the whole overall story. But at some point, those kind of got boring too. I think they can kind of get confusing if you're listening to the audiobook and you don't have a physical copy, because I did listen to this on audio, then I think you might get confused at like where you are in the story and which identity she has assumed. But I guess I did like those, but overall, I just thought this story was really slow and it was really predictable. There was no twist in here. Well, there was one twist in here that I did not expect, but because I was so bored, I didn't care about that point. But I mean, I gave this 3 stars. I was able to get through it. I enjoyed it enough to finish it to see if my predictions were right. So like I said, this one is, to me, really overhyped, but if you are interested in it or you had this one on your radar, by all means pick it up. You might enjoy it more than I did. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed by this one. So then the next book that I have here is Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. This is a adult horror, and we're following our main characters, Anna and Reed. They are a married couple. They just had a young girl. I think her name is Charlie. I'm pretty sure that's what her name is. And Anna had a lot of issues during the birth. She suffered from postpartum, and while she was giving birth, she had become paralyzed. She had a pre-existing injury, but then during birth, it I guess flared up and it caused her to become paralyzed. So she is trying to raise her baby girl while being in a wheelchair. We learned early on that they were entered into a housing lottery and they won. And so now they are going to be moving to this really upscale apartment building in New York. And as soon as they get there, strange things begin to happen, and that's all I'm gonna say for that. I gave this one 3 stars. This is another one that I felt was extremely hyped up, and it just didn't live up to the hype for me. I thought it was okay. So what I did like about this is that I liked how it talked about motherhood. I feel like I've been reading a lot of books that talk about motherhood, but I liked its take on motherhood and women dealing with postpartum depression and how women suffer from that differently. And then it also talked about how people deal with disabilities. So not only is a person that's suffering with a disability, they have to figure that out. It also is a whole thing with the caretakers and how they deal with a person's disabilities, because obviously this came out of the blue for both Anna and Reed, and she's the one that has to deal with it. But also there is a level of care that Reed now has to take for Anna that he wasn't anticipating before. So I like the conversation around that. And I did also like where the story eventually went when they got to the apartment building. But that leads into the things that I did not like about this, and that is how slow this story was in the beginning for me. So it was about halfway into the story before things really started picking up. And in the first half of the book, we're really just getting some background on this apartment building. We're getting some background into Anna and Reed's relationship and how she's dealing with motherhood and how he's trying to cope with her disability now that she's confined to a wheelchair. So it was a lot of setup, I guess. And then eventually everything started to happen, and then it happened really fast. You just didn't have a lot of time to sit with what was actually going on in this apartment. I will say be careful of spoilers, because the synopsis of this does not give any hint about what is going on, but I was actually kind of spoiled for what was taking place in this apartment building from reading reviews on Goodreads. I don't think people should have put what was actually going on, because I do think that that is a spoiler, and I think it takes away from the fun of figuring it out. So by the time I got to what was actually happening, I already knew. So I was just kind of riding the wave until the book was finished. So overall, I thought it was fine. I wished it would have had more of the horror element, and I wish that it wasn't so slow in the beginning, and maybe if I would have connected with the characters a little bit more, I wouldn't have minded as much. But yeah, this one was just okay to me. Next, we have a romantasy, and this is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, which I was really excited to read this one. Again, I picked this up because of the hype that I have been seeing going around for this, because I read fantasy, but I don't necessarily read a lot of romantasies, but a lot of romantasies have been catching my eye lately, so they might become a thing. But this one follows our main character, Oriya, is how I'm gonna say her name. And she lives in a world where humans and vampires coexist together, and she is a human. She was found by the vampire king of the House of Night, I believe. There are 3 different houses, so it's House of Night, House of Shadow, and House of Blood. I believe she was found by the king of the House of Night when she was really young, and so she was orphaned. So he has been taking care of her, and so all of her life she has been trying to survive in a world with vampires, because these vampires basically attack humans. But she's kind of been under the protection of the king, so she hasn't had to worry as much. But at the start of this, we are about to enter into a tournament called the Kajari. And lots of vampires enter into this tournament because whoever wins is granted a wish by their goddess. And so she decides that she's going to enter in because there's a particular wish that she and her father want her to get. So while she's in there, She makes a alliance with a vampire by the name of Rain. And so, as you can already guess, there are some tensions built between them, a romance ensues, and we watch them as they're trying to like figure out this romance and figure out who is going to survive this competition. I gave this 3 stars. It was a solid 3-star read. I did think that I was going to like it a lot more than I did, but I just thought it was a fun time. I really liked the competition aspect of it. Anytime that there's a competition, I'm pretty much sold. So I like that. I loved the tension and the banter between Araya and Rain because they didn't necessarily get along in the beginning, but of course, throughout the story, the tensions begin to build before they realize that they actually are attracted to each other. My biggest complaint about this book is that I wanted to see more of them inside of the competition. So between each trial of this competition, they have like a few weeks, like 4 or 5 weeks or something in between the times the next trial would take place. And so we get a lot of what's happening before the trials. And then once they're in that particular trial of this competition, it goes by really fast. And I just wish that we would have had more time with that because that's really what I was here for, was a competition. But overall, like I said, it was a solid read. I had a fun time while I was reading this. I did pick up a novella that is like set in this. So I think it's like book 1.5 or something. And I'm waiting for the next one to be released. But I am excited to continue on with the story. So next up we have White Negroes, When Cornrows Were in Vogue and Other Thoughts on Cultural Appropriation by Lauren Michelle Jackson. This is a nonfiction read. One of my goals for this year is to read more nonfiction, and so this is my second nonfiction of the year. So this one is just basically about what it says, cultural appropriation, and how white people take Black culture and use it as their own. So it talks about like music, fashion, art, and a whole bunch of other different topics, and it just relates those different topics to how white people have taken those situations and made it into their own. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I highlighted and tabbed quite a bit, but it's just not one of those books that I think will stick with me because a lot of the topics and situations that she was bringing up that has occurred over the years was things that I was already familiar with. There were a few things in here that was new to me, but a lot of this was stuff that I already knew. So it was just giving an explanation on it. But I would highly recommend, like if you have seen this around and you have thought about picking it up, I do think it is a very interesting read and I would highly recommend it. Like I said, it's just not one that I think is going to be something that will stick around with me. So now I am going to jump into my 4-star reads, and I have 3 of those. So the first one is The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. This is a adult fiction sci-fi dystopian. I also think this is kind of scary because the ideas in this to me was just like horrifying. So in this book, we are following a world where everybody has woken up to a box on their doorstep. And if you open the box, there is a string inside, and everybody's string is a different length. We eventually learn, after people have started to do a lot of like research into these strings, the strings represent people's lifelines. So these boxes were dropped on these people's doorstep that is basically telling them how long they have to live, and chaos ensues. So we end up following a bunch of characters that are kind of like interconnected, but we're following these characters because they have different jobs, different roles in society, and we are learning how they are coping with this particular situation. And we're also learning how different parts of the world and different governments are dealing with this situation because people are scared, people don't know what to do. So I gave this one 4 stars. I was thoroughly entertained with this story. I really enjoyed following all of the characters that we did because, like I said, they were like interconnected, and I just like seeing people's different reactions on how they would feel living with the situation with this. And then it also just talks about the downfall, I guess, of something like this happening, because now we have a lot of discrimination happening against like people with short strings, and the government is trying to figure out the best ways to handle that. Jobs are being taken away from like short stringers. There's a lot of politics that's involved in this. That was something that I also read a lot of other people didn't like, was how political this became. But it made sense to me because during this time period, there is a presidential election about to take place, and we see how these candidates are using like the length of people's strings to their advantage, which is most definitely something that would happen if we experience something like this right now. Most definitely. And so we're just watching these characters figure out what to do, whether their string is short or whether their string is long, how that affects the relationships with their families, their loved ones, their romantic relationships. I just like watching the downfall of the world with people knowing how long they're gonna live and when they're gonna die. So I thought this book was really entertaining. I would highly recommend this if you are interested. Next up, we have Reggie and Delilah's Year of Falling by Elise Bryant. This is a young adult romance, and this was so cute. So we are following Reggie and Delilah. They could not be more different from each other. Delilah is biracial, and she has joined this like punk rock band, and so her bandmates are all white. So she is kind of like dealing with some racism that she has experienced by being with this band, because people see her as Black and they think it's weird that she has joined not only a punk rock band, but a punk rock band with white people. And so she has to figure out that whole situation and just being comfortable with herself. Same thing for Reggie. So he is Black, and he is really into Dungeons and Dragons, D&D. People don't really accept him as being like a Black nerdy kid, because those two things just don't go together for some people. They think it's weird that he is so into Dungeons and Dragons. He gets made fun of, especially from his brother. And so he is also trying to be comfortable with himself. So they end up meeting on, I think it's New Year's Eve is the first time that Reggie and Delilah meet each other. And on that first encounter, there's some sparks that are flying, and Reggie is like interested in her. And every encounter after that, they seem to meet each other on every holiday, even like small holidays like National Comic Book Day, I think was one of the times that they met. And so they start to really like each other, and a romantic relationship evolves. But then Delilah realizes that Reggie has not been truthful with her in regards to who he really is, because he's not comfortable with who he really is. So he's trying to portray like this really confident persona to her, and some other things happen, but they are trying to figure out their romantic feelings for each other and just trying to really come into their own. I love this. This was so cute. I absolutely love Reggie in the story. He has a bit of like anxiety as well, and I think the author did a really good job depicting that. And I just loved how much he was really into Delilah, and how every time he was getting around her, he was getting like all nervous and didn't really know what to say. But I also liked that this was just a story about two people who are different. They like different things, but they are learning to really be themselves and accept the things that they like, even if people around them don't, because there's always somebody out there that is going to accept you for you. So I really enjoyed this, highly recommend, would definitely recommend this for, you know, someone in the young adult age range, because I think it's very appropriate. So if this sounds good, pick this one up. My last book and my last 4-star read is episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. I almost did not pick this one up because I have been hearing a lot of mixed to negative reviews about this, and so I was really hesitant, especially because a lot of the people that I follow here on BookTube did not seem to enjoy this one. But guess what? Obviously I did, and I'm so happy that I went ahead and picked this up. So this is all told in mixed media format. So it's just told through like emails, video transcripts, text messages, journal entries. And so in this, we are following this group of people who have their own ghost hunting show. called Fade to Black. And they are working on episode 13, and they need like a really big episode in order to try to get season 2. So they go to this house that's called Foundation House, and it was the site of like these scientists that were experimenting on regular people, trying to get them to experience some sort of like entity. And so at some point, all of those scientists disappeared. Nobody had ever went back to this house. So our group from Fade to Black have decided that this is going to be the site of episode 13. So we're following them as they are trying to make something happen, finally catch something on camera. And guess what? They do. I thought this was so freaking entertaining. I really like the characters. So we have 2 people that are actually the investigators, and one of them is trying to debunk everything that they find. So anytime there's like a sound or something moves or shifts, this particular person is trying to debunk it with like science and have some reason for why this is happening. Then we're following the camera guy, we're following the tech guy, and then we have this girl who's my favorite character, Jessica. She's the only black one in this whole group, and she's an actress, but they just have her with them as, I guess, just to be there. She's just supposed to she's supposed to be that person that's just like reacting to everything, you know, as one would in a situation like this. So that's what she's there for. But she's my favorite character because she has a lot of reactions that I think one would have in a situation like this, and I totally agreed with her. I thought parts of this was hilarious. Not sure if it was supposed to be, but I found it to be hilarious, and I loved the mixed media format. I did not listen to this on audio. I think a lot of people said that if you are going to read this, that you should listen to it on audio, but because it was like changing between formats a lot, I just decided to read it physically, and I don't feel like I missed anything. And that was my worry when I was going into this. Because of how the story is told, I was afraid that I was not going to get like a complete story through this, and this delivered. I would highly recommend this if you decided to pick this up. The only reason why I stopped from giving this 5 stars is because I think it could have delivered a little bit more on the horror. There were some scenes in here that were supposed to be like the horror scenes, and they were fine. I just wish that there would have just been more horror. I wish I had more feelings of dread while I was reading this, and I did not have that, but I enjoyed everything else, and I would highly recommend this book. So those are all my recent reads. Please let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these and your thoughts, or if you plan on picking up any of these books that I have talked about. But that is all that I have for you guys, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.